Here's a question for you. Should Australian soldiers or ADF members who've died or wounded or served overseas be honoured for their service in a more significant way? What about families who supported or are still supporting them? Renee Wilson is the Chief Executive Officer of the Families of Veterans Guild. And the Guild has made a submission into the federal inquiry into defence honours and awards systems. Renee, hello.
Hello, Steve. How are you?
I'm very well. Renee, I always assumed that veterans who died serving Australia automatically received an honour. Is this not the case?
No, it's not. And it shocks many Australians to learn this, that not only veterans who pass away in action and make the ultimate sacrifice for their country do not receive an honour or award from Australia, neither do their families. And certainly the veterans that are wounded or injured in the same operations, neither do they receive anything. We don't have anything akin to the Purple Heart here in Australia.
Whenever I speak with ADF members, admittedly it tends to be soldier types, they often, in fact, in my experience, more often than not, don't want to be singled out or highlighted. Give me your take on that, Renee, as a family member of a veteran.
Yeah, look, I think we need to scratch the surface a bit beyond that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about being singled out, and people don't have to wear the honour or the award. People don't even have to receive it if they don't want to. I think what this is about is actually Australia recognising the service and sacrifice which otherwise goes unnoticed and under-noticed in our community. And the Defence Honours and Awards Tribunal in 2021 inquired into this very issue, as did we. We conducted a consultation as part of our submission to that inquiry, and likewise to the Senate's inquiry at the moment. And we're still finding that people still think it is appropriate to recognise veterans and their families in these circumstances from the nation.
What does that achieve, or why is it important that families of servicemen and women are acknowledged?
When we look at what the Royal Commission has uncovered, particularly when it comes to families, is what they have said is that families are under-noticed in the system, very much under-supported. In Australia, we have a model of care where families only receive avenues of support when it comes to their wellbeing needs, their financial needs, anything, after a veteran passes away. There are no avenues of support, or very limited avenues of support, to the families of veterans when they are undertaking long care journeys, most times as a result of service-related conditions or illnesses that veterans have. And there are almost no relief in the system for them when it comes to the role that they play in enabling Australia's Defence Force all the way throughout that veteran service life as well. Recognition for us is the first step towards actually paving a pathway of support to families, because if you don't see them, then you can't see the role that they're playing and their needs.
Apparently your own research has found that there's a feeling of distrust, I think is the word, in the way that awards and honours are made in Australia. Just explain that to me. What's happening? Why is there this mistrust there?
Yeah, so we conducted a consultation as part of our submission to the Senate inquiry into the honours and awards system, and we conduct very qualitative views of research. We want to know what people are thinking and feeling, and then we wrap that up into themes. And what was coming out very clearly was these perceptions of conflict of interest within the system, perhaps because it is so insular. So it's very much defence driven. You can almost think of it like defence marking its own homework in this system. There's a real lack of external oversight, which gives rise to either real or apparent conflicts of interest within the system. And there's also a real lack of transparency. So there was very strong themes coming out, very strong commentary from the people that responded as part of this consultation. And we included them in our submission for two reasons. The first is we said we would, and we want to make sure that people who took the time to tell us what they were thinking in the hope that they would have their voices raised, had their voices raised. And the second is there is something here that needs to be deeply investigated by this inquiry. We need to get to the bottom of this, whether or not any of the assertions about mates awarding medals to mates, around the disproportionate award of medals and awards to officers as opposed to non-commissioned officers is fact or fiction. The fact is there is not enough transparency. I, as a member of the Australian public and a family member of a veteran, I want to know, is any of this true? And I think that we've raised it so that the Commission has lines of, not the Commission, the Senate has lines of inquiry that they can inquire into, because I want to know the answers to these questions, because
it sounds like
they undermine the integrity of the system.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a bit of a feeling there's a bit of a Canberra club, or am I misreading it?
Look, I think that's certainly what was coming out from the views that were presented in the consultation. And I have to say the majority of people that responded to that consultation were Afghanistan-era veterans and indicated that they had had service in the Middle East area of operations. And
probably our most significant engagement, really, isn't it? It's certainly the longest and most recent.
Most contemporary, absolutely. Yeah. And they're incredibly passionate about this issue, as they rightly should be. And, you know, they can talk in much greater depths of detail than what I can based off a few short questions that I ask them. But as the spouse of an Afghanistan veteran myself, I want to know the answers to these questions. I want to know, is this actually what's happening? And importantly, as an Australian citizen, why is this happening if it is the case? So, for example, some of the examples they give are the looping in of the chain of command in the nomination of junior officers for awards. So the chain of command can say no and not give any reason. That's totally inconsistent with the broader operation of the Australian Honours and Awards system. And that's not how I, as an everyday Australian and civilian, expect that our military personnel are treated.
My guest is Renee Wilson, Chief Executive Officer of the Families of Veterans Guild. Renee made a submission to the Defence Honours and Awards Tribunal inquiry into whether veterans and their families who had died or were wounded or injured in service ought to be recognised. Briefly, what did you actually recommend to them? What did you say, bottom line, Renee?
Bottom line is we want, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, in 2021, the Defence Honours and Awards Tribunal conducted a detailed investigation into this issue. They took our views, multiple other views into consideration, and they ultimately recommended that veterans and their families who had been wounded, injured or killed in operations ought to be recognised by the award system. They made a series of 3 recommendations on that front, including things like memorial clasps, gratitude stars, and the list goes on. They gave that report over to government, and we want to see those recommendations implemented in their totality, because nothing has happened since.
So that you recommended it in 2021. You recommended in 2021. You've had to recommend the same thing again, basically.
Absolutely. So there's been no decisions by this government nor the previous government. Right. And when we're talking about the integrity of an incredibly powerful system and tool, such as the Honours and Awards system within the veteran community that can be used as a force for good in the context of what the Royal Commission has found, it's a no-brainer.
How did you become involved in the Families of Veterans Guild, Renee?
I became involved in this policy space, in the veteran and family policy space, and I say that because I've worked at both within government and now in the community sector for the last 14 years or so, following my husband's service where he was critically wounded in a Black Hawk accident in Afghanistan. And as a result of our lived experience, I saw gaps all across the system for veterans of his age group, as well as families. And I wanted to do something to change that, to turn our trauma into something for good.
I really appreciate you telling me the story this morning. Thanks for coming on.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Renee Wilson, Chief Executive Officer of the Families of Veterans Guild. The inquiry that Renee was referring to, where they've made their submission to, twice now, by the way, 2021 and now 2024, that the inquiry into Defence Honours and Awards is due to report back to the Australian people into the Senate by February next year.